The clanging of spanners and the low hum of a diagnostics unit filled Max Travers' modest workshop aboard Port Ascalon. A few stray cables hung from the open panel of an old cargo hauler's hyperdrive, sparking faintly as Max muttered under his breath and jotted notes on a worn datapad. Another job, another payday barely. He wiped a smear of grease from his face, pushing his dark, unruly hair back as the comm unit on the wall chirped to life. "Travers, you there?" came a crackly voice. Max set the spanner down with a sigh and tapped the comm. "Yeah, what is it?" "Got a weird one for ya. Fancy ship out in orbit. Says their systems are down. None of the local droids can fix it. They're asking for a human." Max blinked. "Why me? I don't do fancy." "You're the closest human mechanic around, pal," the voice replied. "And get this, they're offering triple your usual rate just to come out and take a look." Triple his usual rate was enough to get him out of the shop. "Fine. Send me the doc code. I'll head up now." He powered down his workstation and grabbed his toolkit, making sure his Omni-scanner and plasma wrench were tucked inside. Whatever fancy meant, he figured the job would involve some high-grade tech or another temperamental AI. Still, triple the rate would cover his rent for the next couple months. Not bad for a day's work. As Max piloted his battered shuttle out to the ship, he got his first look at the vessel in question. It was sleek, gleaming silver, and unmistakably alien. Unlike the bulkier utilitarian craft humans were known for, this ship was a masterpiece of curves and flowing lines. Max had seen Extrillion designs before in holovids, but never up close. This was definitely one of theirs. Every inch of it exuded a quiet superiority, the kind that whispered, "We're so far ahead of you, we don't even have to show off." The docking ring extended with a graceful ripple of metal, welcoming Max's shuttle into the ship's bay. Once he stepped aboard, the atmosphere was heavy with something intangible, like stepping into a grand cathedral. The lights were low, the air faintly perfumed, and the walls glimmered as if alive. 2 Extrillion attendants greeted him, their elongated forms draped in flowing, semi-translucent garments. "Mr. Travers," one said in a voice that was both melodic and commanding, "Her Imperial Majesty awaits. Please follow us." Max didn't get much of a choice. They led him through a series of winding corridors that felt more like walking through an art gallery than a spaceship. He caught glimpses of Extrillion crew members, tall, elegant figures who seemed to glide rather than walk. Every now and then, one would glance his way with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. He was clearly out of his element here. They stopped in front of a pair of tall doors that swished open silently. Inside was a chamber that could only be described as regal. Ornate fixtures adorned the walls, and the light shimmered as if filtered through liquid crystal. At the far end, seated on a throne-like chair, was the Empress Ixtra Ven Lin. Her presence was magnetic, her violet-hued skin glowing faintly as she regarded Max with an air of calm authority. She wore a flowing garment that shifted colors as she moved, and her eyes, deep, luminous, and slightly too large by human standards, seemed to take in everything about him in an instant. Max cleared his throat. I heard you needed a mechanic." The Empress's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Indeed, human. Our vessel's primary energy matrix has failed. Our own systems are unresponsive, and the problem appears to be unconventional." She gestured toward a nearby holo display that lit up with a complex web of diagrams. Max recognized some of the components, but many were unlike anything he'd ever seen. He stepped closer, scanning the readouts, and felt his mind kicking into gear. A cascade failure in a high-energy manifold, tricky, but not impossible. "You've got a feedback loop here," he said, pointing to one of the diagrams. "Your system's too efficient for its own good." The AI probably tried to self-optimize, but it ended up creating a recursive energy spike. "That's why you're locked out." The Empress tilted her head, intrigued. "Can you fix it?" "Yeah. I'll need a couple of hours, but I've seen this kind of thing before. Well, a much cruder version of it. I can reroute the output and stabilize the flow." The Empress nodded once, then turned to her attendants. "Provide him with whatever he requires." Max got to work, grateful to focus on something he understood. as he tinkered with the components, bypassing fried circuits and recalibrating the manifold. He began to feel more at ease. The ship's design might have been alien, but engineering was engineering. By the time he finished, the once dormant energy matrix hummed softly, its systems purring back to life. Max wiped his hands on a rag and turned to the Empress. "It's done. Your ship's good as new." She stood, and for a moment, Max thought he saw genuine respect in her expression. "Your skills are impressive. I thank you, Mr. Travers." "No problem," Max said, starting to pack up his tools. "I'll send my invoice through the port's network." As he turned to leave, the Empress's chief advisor stepped forward, an older Extrillian with a stern face and a shimmering robe. "Mr. Travers," he intoned, "it is customary, in times when the Empress is rendered vulnerable, that those who render her aid are bound by our most sacred tradition." Max paused, his brow furrowing. "What tradition?" The advisor straightened, his tone solemn. "By decree of our ancestors, any non-Extrillian who aids the Empress in her time of need is required to ensure the continuity of the royal line." Max blinked. "I'm not following. What does that mean exactly?" The advisor's expression did not waver. "It means, Mr. Travers, that by saving the Empress's ship, you are now obligated to produce 37 heirs with her." There was a long, stunned silence. Max stared at the advisor, then at the Empress, then back at the advisor. "Come again," he said, his voice cracking slightly. The Empress met his gaze, her face calm but unyielding. "It is our way, Mr. Travers. Tradition is law. 37 heirs. Or else." And with that, Max realized his life had just taken a very strange turn. Max Travers stared out the small, circular viewport of his shuttle as it drifted away from Port Ascalon. Below him, the sprawling, metallic labyrinth of the station receded into the distance. Above, the sleek, alien ship of Empress Ixtra Venlin hovered in silent majesty, its silver hull glinting like liquid starlight. Max, arms crossed and brows furrowed, mulled over the conversation that had left him reeling just hours before. 37 heirs. By tradition. Or else. No one had elaborated on what or else entailed, and Max wasn't in a hurry to find out. Still, the weight of the bizarre decree loomed over him. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. This was ridiculous. He was just a mechanic. He fixed things, he got paid, and he moved on. That was the deal. Not this. His comm pinged. It was an automated message from the Empress's ship, providing him with coordinates for their next destination, the Ixtral homeworld. She'd made her offer, clear and seemingly generous travel with her, see the Empire, and then decide. It sounded simple enough, but Max wasn't naive. This wasn't just some guided tour. It was an audition, a courtship, a formality before he was expected to comply. Max sighed and keyed the comm to respond. "Fine," he muttered to himself as he set the ship's autopilot. "I'll take a look. Does it mean I'm signing anything?" As his shuttle docked with the Empress's vessel again, Max braced himself. He wasn't used to being out of his depth. He liked things straightforward, mechanical, logical. But from the moment he stepped back aboard, it was clear nothing about this situation would be that simple. Inside, the ship's corridors felt like they belonged in a museum rather than a working vessel. The walls shimmered faintly, and the ambient lighting seemed to follow him, adapting as he moved. Extrillian attendants guided him to a large chamber where the Empress waited. She stood beside a console that projected a swirling, three-dimensional map of her empire. "Mr. Travers," she said, her voice calm and measured, "I am grateful you accepted my invitation." Max shifted awkwardly, his tool bag still slung over his shoulder. Not much of an invitation, was it? More like a summons. She tilted her head, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Perhaps. But you came." Max set the bag down and leaned against a nearby railing. "Only to see what all the fuss is about. You've got my attention. What now?" The Empress motioned toward the holographic map. "The Ixtral Empire is vast, stretching across hundreds of star systems. We are a people of tradition, of history. Our customs bind us, define us. You are now part of that history. Max ran a hand through his hair, feeling the grease still clinging to his fingers. Look, I'm a mechanic. I'm good at fixing things, not whatever this is. You are more than you think, she said, stepping closer. Her gaze was steady, piercing. You saved my ship when no one else could. You used intuition, resourcefulness. Those qualities are rare and they are valuable. That is why our traditions require what they do. Max frowned. Yeah, about that 37 kids? Are you serious? Entirely, she said, her tone unwavering. It is not a matter of humor, Mr. Travers. Our laws are sacred. And if I say no, her expression softened just slightly, then you will be shown the consequences. I assure you they are unpleasant. Unpleasant how? Max pressed. The Empress hesitated for the first time, as if weighing her words. Let us hope you do not find out. Max sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. You really don't leave much room for negotiation, do you? I leave room for understanding, she said. Travel with me to Ixtral Prime. See my people. Learn our ways. Then decide. If you truly cannot fulfill the decree, we will discuss alternatives. Max studied her, trying to read her intentions. There was a sincerity in her words, but also a resolve that didn't leave him optimistic. Still, the logical side of him saw no better option. He needed time to think, and maybe this trip would give him the clarity he was missing. Fine, he said finally. I'll go, but no promises. Of course, the Empress said, inclining her head slightly. No promises. The journey to Ixtral Prime took several days, during which Max was given free rein to explore the Empress's ship. The Ixtrillian crew were courteous but distant, their gazes always lingering on him a second too long. He felt like an exhibit in a zoo. Whenever he entered a common area or passed through a corridor, conversations hushed and eyes followed him. It was unnerving, but Max wasn't one to back down from a challenge. He'd seen stranger things on the fringes of human space, though not much stranger. The Empress herself occasionally appeared, always composed, always polite. She spoke to him in measured tones, answering his questions about Ixtrillian culture and their reliance on tradition. Max listened, but his skepticism never fully faded. Their traditions seemed less like noble customs, and more like a heavy chain dragging everyone along. Late one evening, Max found himself in the ship's observation deck, staring out at the stars. The soft hum of the engines was the only sound, a soothing backdrop to the swirl of thoughts in his head. He considered the life he'd built independent, simple, unremarkable, and weighed it against what he was being offered. Wealth, status, and a place in history. But at what cost? As the ship entered orbit around Ixtral Prime, Max knew his decision was approaching fast. The Empress's offer was still on the table, but so was that ominous or else. He straightened, squared his shoulders, and prepared to face whatever the Ixtrillian homeworld and its traditions had in store. Ixtral Prime unfolded before Max like a dream on the edge of surrealism. From the observation deck of the Empress's vessel, he could see a planet wreathed in auroras that shifted from violet to gold, clouds that glimmered like spun glass, and sprawling cities that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. It was an alien wonderland, and it took all his resolve not to gawk as the ship glided through the atmosphere. Breathtaking, isn't it? Empress Ixtra Ven Lin said, stepping beside him. She, too, gazed at the landscape, but with the serene composure of someone who had seen it 1,000 times before. I'll give you that, Max admitted. It's something else. This is my home, she said, and if you agree to the terms, it will be part of your legacy as well. Max shot her a sidelong glance. Still not sold on that. The Empress smiled faintly, then turned to leave. You will have time to consider. Max soon found himself caught in a whirlwind of introductions, ceremonies, and diplomatic fanfare. Upon landing, he was ushered into a massive ceremonial hall, where dozens of Ixtrillian dignitaries awaited. The room was overwhelming, high ceilings adorned with intricate crystalline patterns, attendants moving gracefully through the space, and music that seemed to be played on instruments made of light. As the Empress presented him to the gathered officials, He caught fragments of their conversations. So this is the human? Quite ordinary looking. Can he truly be trusted to uphold tradition? He didn't bother hiding his scowl. As far as he was concerned, he'd fixed a ship. That's it. All this pomp and scrutiny? It made him want to retreat back to his small, cluttered workshop. But then there was the Empress. She moved through the halls like a queen, commanding respect and admiration. Though he wanted to dismiss her as another arrogant alien noble, he couldn't deny her intelligence and her presence. As the days passed, she made a point of speaking with him not about the decree, but about other things. His life as a mechanic, his views on humanity's role in the galaxy, and how he saw himself in all this. "You have a unique perspective," she told him one evening over a shared meal. The dish-ake complex, fragrant array of multicolored fruits was surprisingly delicious. Most Extrillians are raised from birth to think in terms of tradition, hierarchy, and responsibility. You see the universe differently. That makes you valuable. Valuable enough to get roped into fathering 37 kids, he quipped, a wry smile tugging at his lips. She chuckled softly, a rare sound that caught him off guard. Perhaps more valuable than that. Despite himself, Max began to notice small details that shifted his opinion of the Empress. She wasn't as cold or aloof as she seemed at first. He saw her consoling a young attendant who had made a mistake during a ceremony, heard her speaking passionately about preserving Ixtral Prime's unique ecosystems, and caught her working late into the night on a treaty negotiation. Beneath the regality was a ruler who cared deeply for her people and her world. And yet, none of this made the idea of 37 children any easier to swallow. "Look," Max said during one of their many conversations, "you're not so bad for an empress, but I still don't see how this tradition makes any sense. Why tie it to someone who just happened to fix your ship?" "It is not about the act itself," she replied, her tone measured. "It is about the bond created through service. In our culture, to aid the Empress in her moment of greatest need is to become a part of her legacy. It is a gesture of trust, of unity. Unity's great and all, but I'm not exactly legacy material. Legacy is not about perfection. It is about what you leave behind," she said, her gaze steady. "I see potential in you, Max Travers. You may not realize it yet, but you have already left a mark on our empire." Max shook his head. "That's just it. I didn't ask to leave a mark on anything. I'm just a guy who likes fixing engines." "And yet," she said, her voice softening, "you have done more than that." Max didn't know how to respond. He felt trapped between his natural instinct to run from this whole situation and a growing, begrudging respect for this alien woman who managed to keep surprising him. By the end of the chapter, Max found himself standing alone on a balcony overlooking one of Ixtral Prime's glowing cities. The skyline was alive with light and movement, and the faint hum of distant celebrations reached his ears. He stared out at it all, grappling with the enormity of what he'd been drawn into. He hadn't made his decision yet. He wasn't sure he could, but part of him wondered, just a small, annoying part, if maybe there was something here worth considering. Something he hadn't been looking for, and might not have found any other way. The Imperial Council chamber was silent, save for the faint, harmonious hum that seemed to resonate through the very walls. Max Travers stood at the center of the vast, circular room, his simple work jacket a stark contrast to the flowing, opalescent garments of the Extrillian officials seated before him. Above them, in a dais that hovered unsupported, sat Empress Ixtra Van Lin. She watched him with an unreadable expression, her luminous violet eyes steady. "Mr. Travers," intoned the lead counselor, a gaunt figure with a voice as smooth as flowing water. "The time has come for your decision. Do you accept the sacred duty placed before you?" Max shifted on his feet. Over the past few weeks, he'd walked the crystalline streets of Ixtral Prime, attended dazzling cultural festivals, and spoken to more dignitaries and scholars than he could count. He'd spent long hours in conversation with the Empress, gaining glimpses of her world, her burdens, and unexpectedly her sense of humor. He'd even started to understand the Extrillian perspective on tradition, though it still didn't sit easily with him. But 37 children? That part hadn't gotten any easier. I'm just mechanic, Max said finally, breaking the heavy silence. I didn't come here looking for glory or whatever this is. I came because I wanted to fix a ship. And yeah, I ended up learning more about your culture and your people, and I respect what you stand for. But this dash, he gestured vaguely upward, toward the Empress and the Council. This isn't me. It's not what I'm built for. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some of the counselors exchanged glances, their elegant brows furrowing. The lead counselor raised a thin, translucent hand, and the room fell quiet once more. Mr. Travers, he said, our laws are not suggestions. They are the foundation of our empire. To refuse a sacred tradition is to reject the very harmony that sustains our people. Max clenched his jaw. With all due respect, I never agreed to any of this in the first place. I didn't know about your traditions. I just fixed a ship because it was the right thing to do. Empress Ixtra, who had remained silent throughout, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of authority. And for that, you are honored, Max Travers. But honor carries responsibility. Our people will not understand if you simply walk away. Max looked up at her, his frustration evident. You said I'd have a choice. And you do, she replied. But choices have consequences. For you, for me, for all of us. Another long silence followed. Max's mind raced. He felt the weight of the Empress's gaze, the Council's expectation, the entire culture pressing down on him. And yet, deep in his gut, he knew he couldn't just say yes out of fear or obligation. That wasn't how he operated. He'd always done things his way, for better or worse. And then an idea struck him. It was ridiculous, but it might just work. What if, he began, his voice steadying, there's another way? The counselor narrowed his pale eyes. What other way? Max took a deep breath. What if I help in another capacity? I might not be able to fulfill the exact terms of your tradition, but I can still help your empire. I've seen how you handle technology, how you maintain your ships and your infrastructure. You're advanced, sure, but sometimes that means you overlook the basics. I can teach your engineers what I know. I can improve your repair protocols, help streamline your maintenance procedures. That's my expertise, fixing things, making them work better. Isn't that worth something? The counselors exchanged murmurs again, louder this time. The lead counselor leaned toward the Empress, speaking in a low voice. Max couldn't make out the words, but the Empress raised a hand, silencing him. She stood slowly, her gaze never leaving Max. You propose a compromise, she said. Max nodded. That's right. I'm not trying to disrespect your traditions. I'm just saying there's more than one way to leave a mark. Let me contribute in a way that fits who I am. I'll give your people something valuable, something lasting. For a long moment, the Empress remained silent. Then she turned to the council. The law is clear, the lead counselor began, but the Empress raised a hand again. The law also allows for interpretation. Tradition evolves, as do we. Max Travers has offered a solution, one that preserves our honor without forcing him into a life he cannot embrace. She turned back to Max. If you are willing to dedicate yourself to this task, to teach and to improve our empire's foundation, then I will accept your compromise. Max blinked. Seriously? A faint smile touched her lips. Yes, seriously. The chamber filled with whispers, some disapproving, others intrigued. The lead counselor, though clearly dissatisfied, bowed his head. If the Empress decrees it, then so it shall be. Max felt a wave of relief wash over him, though he tried not to show it. Thanks. I'll do my best. The Empress stepped down from the dais, coming to stand before him. Her expression was softer now, almost gentle. You have my gratitude, Max Travers. You have given us a new perspective. And perhaps in time, you will find that this place has become a home to you, after all. Max didn't know about that. But as he shook her hand, a gesture he knew was a bit human for the setting, he realized he didn't feel quite so out of place anymore. He'd stood his ground, found another path, and maybe, just maybe, he'd made a difference. And for now, that was enough.